I'm Louise Brown, and I was happy to serve as director of the Wayland Free Public Library from, I think it was like 1977 to 2003. I retired in February 2003. So I've been retired exactly, well, just a little over 20 years. And I still visit the library at least every week. And, and I meet people who remember me. And, and mostly people have nice things to say about the library. I thought it was a good place to work in the town because they don't have good things to say about the assessors or the some of the other departments, but people usually, it was like, what is it, mother and apple pie, that they usually had good things to say about the library, but not always.
Thanks.
What really made me a reader was I had appendicitis, and in those days they didn't, take it out and you go back to school a couple of days later. In those days you stayed out of school for weeks, and then you recover for weeks, and you were in bed a long time. And a good friend was bringing me books from the local library. We had a branch within walking distance. So I was, became kind of read Nancy Drew and that kind of stuff. And then she gave me better stuff to read, and I did. And then I think I set up a little library in my garage for the children in the neighborhood to come and borrow books. You see them now. You see these mini libraries. You go for a walk and you see attached to a tree a little box with a door, and it's a mini library, and it's sort of an honor system. You take one or leave one. Well, I had the original mini library in my garage, and I used to use those like orange crates to store the books, and I guess I copied whatever the library did. If you had a card in the book to sign out, I put cards in the books. My family they kind of made some jokes about it, I think, at my retirement party, that it was always in there that I was probably going to turn into a librarian. I just didn't think, like a lot of people in those days, that you'd find a husband and that would be it. You'd have a family and you really wouldn't have a career. But I really did want to have a career. I was using the Wayland Library, even though the branch was right near my house. The branch wasn't open all the time. I went to the main library, and at the main library, I approached the director and said, do you ever hire people? I said, I'm trained. I've worked in cataloging and reference. I've done research. There was no computers then, so you did it all by hand. The librarian said, no, she wasn't really hiring, and I get the sense that people weren't that pleased with her. She was kind of the stereotype of all the things you think about. I said, well, do you mind if I just fill out an application? And she said, well, all right. So she gave me an application. I filled it out. And a couple of weeks later, I learned she had been fired. The new librarian was cleaning out the desk, and she found my application in the back of a drawer, and she said, I desperately need a cataloger, and you said you wrote on this form that you do cataloging. And I said, yes, I do. She said, well, can you come right over? I want to interview you. And I said, well, I have to get a babysitter. She said, oh, bring your children along, which I did, and they were all right, I guess. And she hired me, and I think my first assignment, it was just like 9 hours a week, 3 mornings or something, and that's how I started there and gradually worked up. When the person that hired me came, she made a lot of changes. She was wonderful. She got rid of the children's librarian who just sat at her desk and never was too timid to do story hours or anything. And she hired this woman, Ann Flowers, who didn't have any kind of library background, but she could just tell that she'd be great, and she was. And Anne became a major figure in children's literature. She just changed the whole children's room. And she applied she told me about that there was a grant application. You could apply for a computer, an Apple, and for children's work. And there were certain softwares that were developed for children to learn to use computers. And Anne encouraged me to write the grant, and she would implement it. It was a big success. I mean, we had, I think 1980, we had our first computer. Do you remember the Apples? Remember the printers had little holes in the paper on the sides? And they called it the green apple because it was painted dark green, and it was all sealed up so little children couldn't get their fingers in anything. The things we did were new and attracted a lot of people, and a lot of people from neighboring towns used our children's room. And Ann Flowers always wanted the best because we disagreed about something. She never would have the Hardy Boys or the Nancy Drew books because she said there was much better literature than that. And I think we argued about when the Harry Potter books first came out, she didn't think they were such great literature. And I remember I read a couple of them just so that I could communicate with my grandchildren. And so that changed. I think people felt more welcome, and they were happy to come there, and the library became much more of a community place rather than a place that you went in to have quiet. There was a poetry group of people that they just asked us, can they meet up on the balcony or something and discuss poetry? And then I said, well, why don't we give you the new meeting room and you have a regular time? And I think to this day they still meet at 2:00 on Wednesday, the poets, and they read and discuss poetry. And then once a year they would have a major an individual who had was a published poet come and talk to them. I think a lot of the programs were for children with arts and crafts, whether it be participation and puppet shows. We brought in some experts, and then the kids kind of made their own little. I remember making yarn dolls for puppets and using boxes to have a little stage, and we, doing much more with art and crafts. There was the ESL, English as a Second Language, and those were very popular. We'd have to limit the sign-ups to 20 people or so, and I think that they're still going on. I mean, when I last saw a library newsletter, they still have people signing up. Some beautiful friendships developed from those relationships. One of my friends was teaching English to a Chinese woman, and the woman was inviting her to her home to visit in China. I mean, once computers came on the scene, we did coding for girls. We had somebody come and help them figure out how to do that. And we had art shows for like a couple of months with an opening. We even got a liquor license so we could serve wine for 2 hours on the Sunday afternoon. And so those were the kind of things that I think people responded to and they enjoyed doing. And then I remember having an exhibit. it's very famous. I think you could probably find it on the internet. The Family of Man. And it was a wonderful photography exhibit that went to many towns and museums, showing alternative kinds of families, gay families, and interracial families. And I thought it was a beautiful exhibit. And I don't know that I even, in those days, the trustees weren't so involved in my day-to-day stuff as they are now. And I don't know whether I even asked them permission. I just thought it would be a wonderful thing to have. But a couple of people really made big complaints about it. They just, they didn't go for it. So, but I never took it down. That was just a wonderful thing, and I was very proud of the fact that we were a founding member. A few of us talked about getting together, and we invited a whole bunch of libraries in the area, and maybe 6 or 7 responded, and we had a meeting, and we talked about having some kind of a network where we shared, so we'd know what's in each other's collections eventually, and thinking of what the possibilities of technology could do for us. We were very happy to share because, there were a lot of weak areas in our collection. So the libraries, we felt we really needed each other. And then I had to present the idea to the finance committee and the selectmen, and that was a challenge. But I remember doing it. I remember taking the bibliographic information you have on a card, and showing it to them and say, this is the information about this book, and this is how many times we have to duplicate this information. And with a computer, it's in there once, and you can take it out. I had to explain all that to them, and that it would be to our benefit to give us the whatever $25,000 or something that we needed to join the network, and they did. They approved it, and I don't think there's any regrets. Yeah. Gordon the cat. Yeah. Oh, he was this big, very large gray cat. You saw the pictures of him, yeah. And he liked the library. He liked to hang out there, and he came, and I was a little concerned because I know some people are allergic to cats and all that, and but he found the library a nice home. But he really belonged at the fire station. I think that was where I don't think we were feeding him. Maybe some people were. We had the woman that came in with a part of a plant, and this was before the computer, so I couldn't go to the computer. So she said, "Can you tell me what this plant is?" And I said, "Well, we'll go up and look on the balcony. There were books on botany, and and with nice illustrations." So we did, and we found it, and she said, "Oh my goodness, that's what he's growing in his room." It was cannabis. So that was I just hope people continue to support the library and let the staff know what you like and what you don't like, and because they really are interested. And I think they have a great staff there now. I know there'll be some changes because I think the director is looking toward retirement. So there'll be some changes. But it's always nice for me to meet someone who, says something nice about the library.